Imagine you are standing somewhere on a hillside in thick fog. You cannot see the valley. You cannot see the peak. All you can feel is the ground tilting under your feet. And yet, with only that, the tilt, and how the tilt is changing, you can walk yourself down to the bottom. Step by step. That is the whole idea behind unconstrained optimization. Over the next few minutes, we will turn that fog-walking instinct into real mathematics. What is the tilt in many variables? How do you know you have actually reached a bottom and not just a flat ledge? And when can you be sure it is the lowest bottom of them all? Here is the problem, stripped to its bones. You are handed a smooth function of several variables, and you are asked for the point where it is smallest. No boundaries, no rules about where you may stand. The whole space is fair game. That freedom is what the word unconstrained means. And if your problem is a maximization, you do not need a second theory. Flip the function upside down, and every peak becomes a valley. So from here on, everything is minimization. But careful, there are two very different prices here. A local minimum is a point that beats everything close to it. A global minimum beats everything everywhere. Calculus, on its own, only ever sees the neighborhood. It can certify this dip and that dip, but it cannot tell you which valley is deepest, not without one extra ingredient we will meet soon. Let us climb one dimension and look down on a landscape from above. These rings are contours. Along any single ring, the function keeps the same value. Tightly packed rings mean a steep slope. Widely spaced rings mean a gentle one. Stack up the partial derivatives, one per variable, and you get the gradient a vector, not a number. Plant it at a point and it always does the same two things. It points in the direction of steepest increase, and it stands perpendicular to the contour through that point. Which hands us the single most useful arrow in the subject. Turn the gradient around, and you are pointing straight down the hill, the direction of steepest decrease. The gradient tells you the slope. Differentiate once more, in every combination, and you get the Hessian, a square, symmetric matrix that tells you the curvature. Not how fast the function is changing, but how fast the change itself is changing. Slope says which way. Curvature says what shape. For this particular function, the curvature is the same at every point, so the rings are perfect ellipses. In general, the Hessian changes as you move, and reading it correctly is exactly how you will tell a valley from a mountain pass. Now the trick that makes everything else possible. Take any smooth function, however complicated, and zoom in on one point. Use only the gradient, and you get a straight line, the flat, linear picture. It matches the function's height and its slope, and then it immediately drifts away. Now add the curvature term as well. The line bends into a parabola, and suddenly the approximation hugs the curve. This is the second-order Taylor model, value plus slope plus 1/2 of the curvature term. Watch it travel. Wherever you stand, the model rebuilds itself from the gradient and the Hessian at that point, and locally it is an excellent stand-in for the real thing. And that is the engine of the whole subject. Build the local parabola. Jump to its bottom. Build a new one. Repeat until the ground goes flat. So how do you know you have arrived? Think about it backwards. If the ground still tilted even slightly, you could step downhill and do better. So at any minimum, the tilt must vanish completely. That is the first order condition, and it is genuinely necessary. But notice how much it lets through. Every place this curve goes flat satisfies it, and they are not all minima. Two of these are valleys. One is a summit. The slope cannot tell them apart, because at all three the slope is exactly zero. We need the second derivative. In many variables, the second derivative is the Hessian. At a flat point, the Taylor model has no linear term left, so the entire local shape is decided by that matrix. If the curvature is positive in every direction you could possibly step, the Hessian is positive definite, you are sitting in a genuine ball. Three verdicts are possible. Curve upward in every direction, and it is a minimum. Curve downward in every direction, and it is a maximum. But if it curves up one way and down another, mixed signs in the eigenvalues, you are on a saddle. A mountain pass, the low point of the ridge, and the high point of the trail through it. And there is one honest gap. If the curvature is zero in some direction, the second order test simply cannot decide, and you must look closer. Here is the property that rescues us from all that local uncertainty. Pick any 2 points on the graph and join them with a straight chord. If the chord never dips below the curve, no matter which 2 points you chose, the function is convex. On the left, that test passes everywhere. On the right it fails, this chord slices clean through the hill in the middle. One ball versus a landscape with more than one valley. For a twice differentiable function there is a clean test. It is convex exactly when the Hessian is positive semidefinite at every single point, curvature that never goes negative anywhere. And here is the payoff, the single most valuable sentence in unconstrained optimization. If your function is convex, then finding a flat point is no longer just a candidate. It is the answer. Every local minimum is global. And if the curvature is strictly positive, that global minimum is the only one there is. This is why a good modeler checks for convexity before writing a single line of code. Since every method leans on a local parabola, it is worth knowing the parabola inside out. In many variables it looks like this, a quadratic form built from a symmetric matrix A. Its gradient is beautifully simple, a times x minus b. Set that to 0 and you do not need an algorithm at all. Solve one linear system, and you have landed exactly on the stationary point. And notice something lovely. Differentiate again, and the Hessian is just A. The curvature never changes. So the entire personality of this function is hiding in one matrix. Look at what the matrix does to the map. Positive definite, all eigenvalues above 0, and the contours close up into ellipses around one unique minimum. Mixed signs, and they open into hyperbolas, a saddle, with no lowest point at all. And if one eigenvalue is exactly 0, the ball stretches into a trough with a whole valley floor of equally good answers. And you do not always need eigenvalues to check. For small matrices, Sylvester's criterion is quicker. Walk down the leading minors, and if every one of them is positive, the matrix is positive definite. 2 is positive, the determinant 3 is positive, this one is a ball. You are standing here, and you want to move somewhere better. Which directions actually take you downhill? There is a clean test, and it comes straight from the linear part of the Taylor model. Take the dot product of the gradient with your proposed direction. If it comes out negative, the function must go down, at least for a small enough step. Negative dot product means the direction leans against the gradient at an obtuse angle to it, which means you are not locked into a single choice. A whole half space of directions qualifies this entire fan, anything leaning away from the gradient. That freedom is exactly what different algorithms exploit. The most obvious pick sits right down the middle of the fan, the negative gradient, the steepest local decrease. Pick the direction, then decide how far to walk, then do it again. That loop is the skeleton of every method you will ever meet here. Choose a descent direction. Find a step length along it. Update. And stop when the gradient has shrunk to almost nothing. Every algorithm in this family differs in just one place, how cleverly it picks that direction. Two methods can both reach the bottom and still be worlds apart in how long they take. Watch what happens when the valley is long and narrow. Steepest descent keeps aiming perpendicular to the contour it happens to be standing on, so it ricochets from wall to wall, inching along the floor instead of running down it. Put the shrinking error on a logarithmic scale, and the difference is stark. Linear convergence chips away by a fixed factor each step, a straight, patient slide. Quadratic convergence roughly doubles the number of correct digits every iteration and falls off a cliff. Formally, you compare successive errors. The exponent p is the order. P equals 1 with a constant between 0 and 1 is linear. If that constant drives to 0, it is superlinear, the quasi-Newton territory. And p equals 2 is quadratic, which is what Newton's method buys you, in exchange for computing a Hessian at every step. Let us put the recipe to work. First, always solve for the flat points. Both partial derivatives vanish when x is 2 and y is 3. That is our only candidate. Second, always test the curvature there. The Hessian is 2 on the diagonal and nothing of it, so both eigenvalues are 2 positive definite. A strict minimum, and since the function is quadratic with constant positive curvature, it is convex, so this is the global minimum. The value at the bottom is exactly 0. Now the cautionary tale. This function is also flat at exactly one point, the origin. The first order test is perfectly happy. But look at the curvature, plus to one way, minus to the other. Mixed signs, indefinite. Walk along the x-axis, and the origin is the bottom of a valley. Walk along the y-axis, and the very same point is the top of a hill. It is a saddle. This is precisely why you never stop at the gradient. Here is a quadratic with real numbers in it. Before solving anything, check the matrix. The leading entry 4 is positive, the determinant 11 is positive, so by Sylvester's criterion this is positive definite. A ball which guarantees one unique minimum exists. And because the gradient of a quadratic is linear, no iteration is needed. Invert the matrix, hit it with B, and the minimizer drops out 1/11 and 7/11. About 0.09 and 0.64. Last one, and it ties the whole chapter together. Start at the point 1, 1. The gradient there is 2 and 4, so steepest descent points the other way, -2, -4. Now, how far? Substitute the moving point back into f, and you get a function of the step length alone. One variable. Differentiate, set it to 0, and the best step is 5/18, about 0.28. Take it, and you land here. The function has dropped from 3 to about 0.22 in a single step, and notice we have crossed onto a lower contour, closer to the center. The direction came from the gradient. The step length came from a one-dimensional search. Put those two ideas together, and you have an optimizer. Let us gather everything into one picture. At the center of it all sits a single equation, the gradient equals 0. That is where every search ends up pointing. Around it, the ideas that make it usable. The gradient gives you slope, the Hessian gives you curvature, and together they build the local parabola. Definiteness sorts a flat point into a minimum, a maximum, or a saddle. Convexity upgrades any local answer to a global one. And the descent loop turns all of it into an actual algorithm. If you remember one working habit, make it this one. Solve for the flat points first. Judge them with curvature second. Never merge the two steps. Everything after this is engineering on top of that theory, smarter ways to pick the direction, and cheaper ways to fake the curvature. Steepest descent, Newton's method, and the quasi-Newton family that sits between them. You already know why they work. Next, we build them.